So today we're going to be taking a look at creating a graphic of Lionel Messi in Adobe Photoshop. This is assembled from just a random image from Google, but we're looking to see how we can turn it into more of a customized poster representing his greatness, especially after winning the World Cup and getting close to over 800 goals career-wise. To begin, we're going to look to create out a new blank document. I'll go to File, in Photoshop, New. In document size, I can go over to Print, top navigation. I can choose letter size. This is a pretty standard size overall. If I do want to customize it, I can always modify the settings. I'll make it 8x12 just for this scene. At 300 dpi, making sure that we have a high quality print variation. I can hit Create. And we can always get into scaling or cropping down the image later on. But we're going to look to place in the image of Lionel Messi into our document. If I want to place in an image, I can go File, down to Place Embedded. Or if you have the image off on your desktop or downloads, I can click and drag it right onto the document. You can see that the image doesn't fit precisely, but we are going to scale it down a little bit so it doesn't necessarily need to fit in this area completely. I can scale it down, and I just want to help center his face a little bit more into the document overall. Once I'm satisfied with the placement and size, I can hit Enter or Return. Now we're going to look to separate the actual head from the background. There's a lot of distraction going on behind him. So we can go up to Select at the top navigation, down to Subject. It does a very good job overall, but there is some issues with the selection around the hairline. If I want to fix the hair and the beard, I'm going to go up to Select and select a mask. With the Select and Mask view, it allows me to get a better interpretation of his hairline, making sure that there's no visible issues or hairs that are being selected out or cut out. And particularly around the beard, because of all the pointy hairs, it can occasionally pick up or take out elements that you don't want. So with the selected mask, I'm going to go over to the Refine Edge tool, second tool left side. And I can zoom in, just get a closer look. Overall, it did pretty well, but I can see that there are some issues of black appearing through the beard. So with the Refine Edge tool, I just want to have a brush large enough to go just overlapping the edge of the hair where it meets the background. And I can click and drag over this area, and it'll help to eliminate out this black elements that I do not want. And it is going to create a subtle blend between the background and the subject, but this will recognize and do a good job of separating out those hairs from the background. When I get into larger areas where I can see the hair being cut out, I can click and drag over this area. And Photoshop does a great job of recognizing overall. It can be modified if I wanted to get into more customization, but for right now, this definitely does work for just cutting out the subject. I'm just going to go around the edge of the hair, making sure I'm getting all these little hair strands. And you want to be careful not to go into the darker areas. If I do start to click and drag inside the darker area, it can end up erasing out areas of the hair that I don't want. So just make sure to avoid those type of issues. But once I'm satisfied with the location and erasing out the hairs that I don't want, I can hit OK. And we still have the selection around the area. What we're going to do is add a layer mask to crop out and eliminate out all the needless area that we do not need for the subject. Now that we have him separated from the background, we could get into eliminating out some other elements that are not necessary, particularly down by the shoulders. We're going to make his head and collar stand out from the background. If I wanted to get into erasing out, I can go on to the layer mask, go over to the eraser tool, make sure you have a foreground color white. I can adjust the size of the brush using the left or right bracket. and erase out areas that I would not want to see or feel that are distracting from the design. Same thing over on the right side. I want to have a separation from his shoulder collar, and I can eliminate out the blue strokes. If I did want to get into selecting out areas, I could always go over to the magic wand or the quick selection tool. If I click and drag, it will allow me to select out the areas that I want to eliminate. I'm going to leave the blue stripe right in the middle. If I want to deselect or cut out this area, I can hold down Alt or Option, and it'll cut that from the rest of the selection. But when I do erase, I'm erasing on the layer mask. That way I can protect the image. If I were to disable this layer mask, I can right click on this black box. Disable layer mask, you see I actually have the entire image still visible. But we're enabling the layer mask so we can create some modifications and create an interesting design. So I can deselect, Control or Command D. And now I want to get into creating more of a graphic or infographic type of design. A lot simpler, adding in some highlights or stats that might recognize his greatness. We're first going to look to turn our subject to black and white. To do this, I'm going to use my adjustments panel. If I don't see my adjustments panel, I can go up to Window at the top, Navigation, Adjustments. And with my adjustments panel, I'm going to click on the black and white adjustment. Third one, second row. This will set our subject into a black and white tone. We're also going to look to add some noise. To add some noise, I'm going to create a new layer. I'm just going to fill this in with a light gray color. Over my foreground color, just going to bring this down to a very light gray. You can see my hex number is DE, 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 and click OK. I'm simply going to just paint in this area with a gray tone. It sits over top of our subject, but what we're going to be looking to do is create some noise that's going to help create some graininess over the overall image. With this layer 1, I'm going to rename this layer grain so we can see it. I'm going to go up to Filter at the top, Navigation, down to Noise, and we click on Add Noise. With the panel that pops up, we can adjust our settings. Be careful not to adjust it too much, but you can see that as I do raise it up, it is showing graininess. Right now, it's a little bit overwhelming, but I'm just going to raise this to about 30%. With 30%, I click OK. And this grain is actually showing multiple colors. If I get closer to it, you see a combination of CMYK. But we're going to use our blend modes to help blend this into our actual image of Lionel Messi. So over on the drop down where it says normal, I can go through the options to see how the graininess is going to affect the subject. And what I can tell, the multiply is a very strong contrast where it helps to still accentuate him without distracting from the overall image. I can go through many different options to see how the rest are going to affect, but realistically I already know that multiply is a good variation. If I feel like it's too dark, I could always drop the opacity, just subtly make it less stark. But the graininess just gives another element so it's not so flat. Without it, if I were to hide this grain, it's just a little bit softer overall. But with that element, just allows us to have a little bit of graininess, something that's going to add a texture to our design. So now that we have our subject in black and white, we're going to get into using typography to help create an additional element. Over on the left side navigation, we're going to click on the capital T icon, click and drag to create out a horizontal type box. My type size currently is set too high at 300 or 260. I can reduce this size down, but I do want to clear out any text that I'm currently seeing. And I want to make sure that my foreground color is appearing as black, so I can see it when we do start to type. And the current font that I am using, the NCS Radahumes, if that's pronounced correctly. But this font has a wide base, a sans serif font. And I'm just going to enter in Messi into his sign. With the type, we're going to actually be running this on a vertical format. I can hit Command or Control T, depending on Mac or PC. I'm going to scale this type up so that the Messi runs from the top edge of his left side of his head down to the collar of his shirt. I can expand it out if I want to. What I do want to be careful of is that I don't have the S's or the letters appearing outside of the subject. Once it appears outside the subject, you realize that it's going to cut out part of the letters when we do a different effect. I can always adjust with the arrow keys right now, and if I wanted to see this in a different color, just so you can see it standing out, see that the M goes right up to the edge of the hair, the I goes down to the bottom of this collar. But we want to create a blend and create some interest, creating a combination of elements within our subject. To create an interesting format with this type that we have for Messi, we're going to create a layer mask that's going to reveal a second version of Messi. To do this, we need to actually duplicate the original subject or image. So the image of Messi over on the right side. We're going to right click and duplicate layer. You can always hit Command J as well. And I'm actually going to right click on the layer mask, and with the layer mask, we have to first make sure that we turn it into a smart object. Over on the highlighted gray area, right click and hit rasterize layer. Now, when I go over to the layer mask of our subject, I'm going to cancel on the pop-up if I accidentally click on it. I'm going to hit apply layer mask. When I apply layer mask, it's going to eliminate and merge the layer mask onto the subject, erasing out the original subject's background. But we always have a copy underneath just in case we need to refer back to it later on. But with this area now created, we can get into compiling and creating some interest for our Messi image. If I were to go back to the other variation of Messi, you can see how the type is displaying his actual headshot with inside of the text, just using a different variation in size. So now what we're going to look to do is get into modifying the same idea on his face here. We're going to first look to add a layer mask onto our Messi copy. And we actually want to create the sense that the text is revealed inside of this portrait. So I'm going to hold down Control or Command and click on the capital T icon, indicates text layer. And I can hide the text layer for right now, and we can see that we still have the dotted line appearing around the Messi image. With our portrait copy, we're actually going to erase out everything outside of the selected area. So to erase out everything in the selected area, I'm going to go Select, Inverse, and hit Backspace, cutting out everything outside of the letters. To better see this, what I'm going to do is hide the original Messi portrait, and you see that we still have the portrait inside of the text. The reason why we did this is that we can now add in some effects to make the portrait underneath of it separate itself a little bit more. So for the Messi subject, again, I'm going to duplicate the original layer, right click on the Messi portrait, duplicate layer again. I'm going to have to rasterize the smart object, right click on the layer, rasterize layer. Then I can right click on the layer mask and apply layer mask. With this, I'm going to use another layer mask. I want to make sure to deselect first, Command or Control D depending if you're on Mac or PC. And we're going to add a layer mask so that we can create a gradient that makes the left side of Messi's face disappear. The reason why we're doing this is that we can create a transition that blends the name with the actual portrait. We're going to switch over to our gradient tool over on the left side of his face. I'm going to use the gradient tool. With the gradient tool, I want to make sure that I'm using a white to black gradient. I can go click on the drop down for basics, click on the first option. And I'm going to drag from his left ear over to the right. Just make sure to hide the original Messi copy. To really see this, I'm going to drag again from left ear over to the right. But we want to make sure again that we are only seeing the text and the portrait that we just added layer mask to. You can see this transition where it's allowing us to see Messi within the text area while it's still not affecting or erasing out the entire subject. I can drag it further and you see how it's going to affect the image overall. If I want to make the text stand out a little bit more, I can select on portrait text mask. And we're going to go down to FX and we're going to add just a stroke and go into my blend modes or blending options. Choose stroke. I'm going to drop down my stroke just so it's a thin line that helps create separation between his subject and the outline. Next, we want to get into bringing in some color into the design. To bring in some color, I wanted to use a reference. As he's from Argentina, I want to bring in some Argentinian colors. So I can go up to File, Place Embedded, look to bring in, say, the Argentinian flag. I have it already pre-selected and downloaded. I can click Place. The only reason that we're seeing currently black and white is just the fact that this is behind our original black and white layer mask. So I can move this layer above my Messi text, and now I have this light blue. What I'm going to do is sample this light blue, use the eyedropper tool, 7th tool, left side navigation, sample the light blue color. Then I'm going to bring back the original Messi text that I had. I can use the type tool, highlighting over the text. I'm just going to switch the foreground and background color twice so that this new light blue color from Messi is now appearing inside of the area. But I still want to maintain and see his facial features inside of the text. So I'm going to go over to my blend modes where it says normal in the layers panel. I can go through the options to see how it's going to transition and reveal his subject again. It's up to you to decide which one blends the best for what you're trying to create. Good variation, it's overlay. We're still picking up the subject inside. It matches pretty well to the Argentinian flag. And again, if I ever wanted to make changes, if I decided that I wanted to modify the mask or the gradient mask that we put over top of our subject, I could simply just go over to the layer mask, click on the gradient tool, and redraw this area out. It will allow me to be able to modify this, strengthen up the fade, make it further if I wanted to fade more of his face out. But I'm just looking for more of a subtle vision, allowing his eyes to be completely visible, and it starts to fade out as it reaches the letters. Next, I'm going to take the original Messi text, and we're going to throw in another variation of text. I can look to right-click and duplicate this layer. And instead of Messi copy, we're going to type in goat. With this goat text, I can use the move tool, slide it over to the right, highlight the text, and I am going to change the overlay back to normal. But with this normal, we are going to change out the color, and I'm just going to go a lighter variation of gray. Just so it just stands out over top of the background. I'm going to change the text to say GOAT and scale this up so it runs down the right side of the page. As it reaches the top and bottom edges, I can slide it over to the right, make sure it touches the right side edge. And then I'm going to move this layer underneath of my portraits of Messi. Again, if it is too strong, we can always look to select out the text. I'm just going to lighten this up a little bit. You could always drop the opacity as well if you felt like it's not still too light. I just want it faded in the background. Give it a nice element that it stands out or kind of represents him in the background overall. Other elements that I could consider bringing in, maybe I want to represent his clubs. I go File again, Place Embedded. I'll bring in FC Barcelona logo, just a simple black and white logo. Not as significant. I can make it a little bit smaller than the Argentinian flag. And also going to bring in PSG logo as part of his career stats. I go to File, then Place Embedded, choose out the PSG logo. Again, scale this down just so it's a little bit more proportional. They both have significance, but we're just trying to create attention that representing all the clubs. Finally, looking at the details on this, I can look to affect some of the features. I want to first right-click on the layer on the layer for PSG. Again, rasterize the layer so we can affect it. Same thing with the FC Barcelona. Rasterize it. I can use the magic wand to select around the area. Cutting out the needless area, I can just simply select using the magic wand, hit backspace, deselect, and now if I wanted to, I can throw a drop shadow or a stroke just so it stands out a little bit off the page. I can click on down to blending options or double click on the layer to bring up the blending options. I'm going to add just a white stroke, but you really can't see it until we add a drop shadow. With the drop shadow, it doesn't need to be too strong. I'm just going to reduce down the drop shadow size to about 20 pixels, 25 pixels. And I can move up the stroke, just give it a little bit more thickness so it stands out. And again, if you do modify this stroke, you may have to modify the drop shadow just to make it a little bit stronger. Now with the effects on the Barcelona logo, I can right click on this layer, copy layer style, right click on the PSG layer, and paste layer style, applying the same effects. But we can see that it is leaving this white border around the edge. Again, I'm going to use the magic wand to select around the outside edge of this. If I want to be a little bit more selective or test out different variations, I can probably use the quick selection tool to select around the outer edge. Again, I'm going to hit backspace to cut out the area. Now we're left with the Paris logo just showing the circular design. If you wanted to add in some other special features, maybe I want to create attention on the stat lines. I'm going to go over to the left side navigation, click on the rectangle tool. The rectangle tool will create out its own layer. I'm going to draw out a rectangle over top of his eye shape. And again, I want to pick up the original blue color from his Argentinian flag. So with the rectangle layer, I'm going to go click back on the rectangle and change the fill so it picks up the sample And again, this layer will have to be brought up above our black and white. And with the stroke, I'm going to eliminate out the stroke completely, just leaving the blue, but we are going to put a blend mode on. And if I go to the overlay, it matches to the effects that we had for this Messi text. If I did want an outline on this, I could pick up the same blue just so it blends in better with Messi himself. I may want to draw out a stroke. Over on the left side navigation, click on the pen tool. So with the pen tool, I want to make sure that I'm not selected on the rectangle layer or clicking on one of the points. Even if I started off to the side, I click a point, move downward, hold shift to get a perfectly straight line. But I don't need a fill, not that we're drawing any width, but I'm just going to use this blue stroke as a info line segment that's going to draw attention to the information. I can also use the same one if I wanted to duplicate out this feature. Bring it to a new area. I'm going to hold down Alt or Option, depending on the computer. And I could bring in the same graphic over to our left side so that it makes a connection to his teams as well. So if I want to remember some career stats, again, I'm going to look to create a text box, but I'm going to scale down my text first. Reduce down to 36 for right now. With the type tool, we want to make sure that we're not clicking in an area that already has type. I'm going to start over to the left side. I can always move the text later on. But again, my text is quite large, so I'm just going to reduce this down. We get some standard text, but I am going to enter in currently having 799 career goals. I'm going to keep everything in capital letters so it fills out the space. Under that, I can also do representing his career assists, 352 assists. But I do want to create some attention and make sure that this does stand out. So I'm going to raise this up above our black and white mask. With the type tool, I'm going to select it out. Use the blue color that I have in the foreground. And to modify this, I'm going to select the text, highlight under goals, and scale this down using the character panel, window character. Scale down the type size so that it sits right underneath of 799. I can hit enter to place goals underneath. Highlight assists, same thing. Just gonna go over to my character panel, scale down the text so that sits perfectly right underneath of 352. I can hit return so it sits directly underneath. Modifying out the tracking, we can adjust the space in between the letters so that it sits perfectly under the 352. Goals, I'm going to scale down the type just a little bit more. Again, making sure that it runs all the way from edge to edge to the 799. And also as well, modifying out the tracking, clicking and dragging over to the right so it runs on the edge. Now I can look to place this just down below, lining it up to the edge of the line that we created. Just a nice element to create attention on some of his career stats. You could always add in other elements as well if I decided that I wanted to figure out the years that Messi played at Barcelona. I can enter in that information. So while at Barcelona, I could take the same stat. I'm going to click on the 799 goals. I can hold down Alt or Option, click and drag it over to the side. Right above the FC Barcelona logo, I'm going to change the stats so it reads from 2000 to 2021. He played for FC Barcelona. I scale down the type, reducing down the size, and placing it right above the Barcelona logo. Holding down Alt or Option, clicking and dragging this downward, I create the same effect for Paris Saint-Germain logo. Playing from 2021 to current, and we'll see if he ends up playing with another club going forward. You could recognize his Argentinian clubs, but realistically we're looking just to capture the effect of his professional career and what he accomplished in this time. So looking at the graphic overall, you could look to add in some other features. If I decided that I wanted to have some type of stroke or gradient that might travel down the background, just to add a little bit more life and color. I could pull in elements or aspects from his actual shirt, jersey. Maybe I want to look to draw out a section. I'm going to go over to the pen tool, left side navigation. Use the pen tool to trace out the beginning of his collar. Clicking, dragging, matching out the shape. I can hold down Option or Alt, cutting out the point. And click and drag to create out the curve of what would be the stripe down the middle of his shirt. Then back to where I started. If I need to modify some lines, I can go over to the direct selection tool, click on the anchor point I want to modify, and then adjust to where needed. Again, I want to change out the color of this object. My current fill color is none. I'm going to switch this over to the blue and eliminate out the stroke completely. If I feel like it's too strong, you can always drop the opacity. But we just want to make sure that it is a fluid design to the overall look and feel of the piece. So feel free to add in other elements as you'd like, but overall this is what we're going for. I hope you enjoyed. Have a good day.